Um, Good evening and good morning, and happy Diwali to all of you. And sorry for being late. I was having some trouble um, getting the internet connected. So today is the eighth session of this eight-part webinar series, Mindfulness on the Go. And I am Vinay Dabholkar, your host for this session. And I'll be joined by Padmaja Parulkar. Hi, Padmaja. Um,
Hi, Vinay. Hi.
hi. Yeah. So Padmaja, let me introduce Padmaja. Padmaja is a writer, editor, and nature photographer. In fact, we are going to see some of her photographs today. She's also been my collaborator in the book launch of this book, Mindfulness Connecting with um, the Real You, which is what we are using in Mumbai about a year ago. And we have some, you can say, almost like unfinished conversation from that time. She was nudging me to talk about Groundhog Day, and somehow we couldn't do that. So hopefully we'll do that. But for the past few years, she's also been exploring, um, you can say, self-discovery in meditation retreats. She's been to Coimbatore and studying with teachers like Sadhguru and Eckhart Tolle. So we'll hear from her on that as well. We are recording this session and we'll upload this on YouTube. Yeah. Okay. So before I and Padmaja start on this chapter, which is titled "Dying to Self-Image Every Moment," let me uh, let me connect this chapter with what we have done so far in a brief manner. Okay. So I'm going to share my screen so that I can share a few slides with you. Okay. All right. So just to recap, this is the definition, like a working definition we have been using of mindfulness, which is mindfulness is a process of learning to see clearly despite fast, automatic, and biased thinking anytime, anywhere. Now, just one symbolism which is very dominant in this kind of domain is light, which is this festival of light that we have. Whenever you see clearly, sometimes people use light bulb for an idea, and also words like enlightenment. So light has been a very powerful symbol in this process of seeing clearly. In chapter 3, 4, and 5, we used train of thought as a metaphor, train, and asked questions like, can I learn to hop off the train? For example, can I feel my breath? Can I watch um, the flowers, hear the birds chirping, and so on? In chapter 4, we ask the question, at this moment, is this the right train? Is this serving any useful purpose? Or is it more like a wasteful thought? And chapter 5, we ask the question, what is fueling this train? What is the source from which this train, especially if this train of thought is repetitive and compulsive, where is it getting fueled from? So that was one metaphor we carried over 3 chapters. We also introduced another metaphor, the metaphor of map, in chapter 5, 6, and 7. We asked the question, is a part of the map frozen? And we are saying if that's frozen, then of course it won't work for certain conditions. And the term we used there was assumption of absolute necessity, where we are trying to freeze some part which potentially is causing some negative emotion. Chapter 6, we ask the question, how do I look like in the map? And we use the term self-image. And we said that this is a part of the map where we are extremely cautious about. We want that self-image to be really good looking, polished, and so on. And in chapter 7, we asked and perhaps also saw whether it's meaningful to ask the question how to improve my map image. And perhaps we are asking the question, is that even the right question to ask? In chapter 7, we also said that, I mean, we kind of made a little bit of strong statement, and we need to really check this to see if it is true for you. All I ever know is a map. Brain, I mean, the brain which is inside the skull has no access to light, sound, and touch and all that. All it gets is electrical signals and chemical activity, and it just builds maps of beliefs. All I ever know is a map. Territory is largely unknown and ultimately unknowable. And we also said the map is active and intimately connected with the territory, which means it's not just a map to say, oh, this place is here, this place is there. Map actually acts out through our actions. So it's an active map. Yeah. That brings us to this chapter, and we'll explore this further, which is dying to self-image every moment. So Padmaja, where do we begin on this?
Yeah, this is the best place to begin, Vinay. Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone, and a very happy Diwali to all of you. Uh, so, Vinay, isn't this the best place to begin? The title itself, Dying to Self Image Every Moment. Throughout your book, you have mentioned a lot of attributes of mindfulness. You've talked of watching your thoughts, overthinking, identifying wasteful thoughts, and so on and so forth, which is still understandable, easy to digest. Maybe even the exercises and aids that you have mentioned are, doable. But I think this thing, dying to self-image, seems to be one of the toughest, toughest thing to digest because, after all, we all have a self-narrative, an identity, which is very dear to us. And if you say that you got to, kill it or, uh, uh, the self-image itself is something that is questionable, then what remains?
Yep.
Yeah.
So I guess Padmaja, one of the place to start could be the movie which is we have been using as a dominant metaphor in this
Yeah.
chapter,
Yeah.
which is Groundhog Day. Do you think we can start there?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So let's maybe like I did in the past. Let's say Gabbar saying example, and in a previous one Anthony Gonsalves. Let's begin with this Groundhog Day, and that gives us a starting point, and then probably we'll go further. Okay. So let me share again the slides where I'll share a few pictures from this movie to just give you a brief idea as to what's going on here. Okay. Now, Groundhog Day um, is a movie where this protagonist is a weatherman, and he's gone to actually cover an event, which is the event of Groundhog Day, where when there's a long winter, there's a belief that this groundhog, which is like a rodent, will come and depending on where he looks or something, they'll decide whether the winter is over. So anyway, he and his crew they cover the event and they're trying to head back, and a blizzard comes, and they just are stuck in that place. So he stays in a hotel, and that's the picture we are seeing. He's waking up actually, and interestingly, what happens is this 2nd February, which was a Groundhog Day, and what was expected to be when he wakes up the next day, it is 3rd February. But he hears the same song he heard with the alarm, and he looks out of the window and he sees again Groundhog Day. Everybody's talking about Groundhog Day. So it's the 2nd February again. Yeah, so it's a very strange situation where it starts, where he, he wakes up, I'm sorry, and it's the same day, and he goes, and people are talking about the same thing. So he's very confused actually. He meets doctors, he meets psychiatrists. Um, Nothing. He just, every day he sleeps, the next day happens to be 2nd February, Groundhog Day. So of course, he gets really bored for a while, and then he realizes anything that he does, it has no consequences, right? Anything you do next day again is the same day. So he goes binge drinking, he does reckless driving, he does all kinds of things which otherwise would be considered um, immoral, whatever he wouldn't do otherwise, breaking the law types. Nothing happens. Whatever he does, again he wakes up with the same day. So it's like you can say it's like a time trap for him. He's in a time loop of 1 day duration. Every day he sleeps, next day is 2nd February. And then our man, after enjoying for a few days, and it goes for a while, and he's again bored. Now what happened? Every day looks like the same day. So he commits suicide. And actually, even after committing suicide, it's again 2nd February. So he doesn't know what to do. Um, and in some sense, we can relate to at least part of the story where we feel the day to be repetitive. In fact, this Groundhog Day people remember during lockdown period, because you're locked down kind of in the same place and meeting the same people, and you feel you're stuck. So this is the Groundhog Day. And at some point in the movie, he actually gives up. Phil actually gives up trying to change things. And that's when things begin to change for him. And he begins to find things which otherwise were not visible to him. And he begins to learn new things. And for example, he begins to learn ice sculpting as one of the things. And he learns because the same day, but he can learn things. So this is really a story of, you're still stuck in the time loop, but one part of the movie shows that he's really he doesn't like this present moment at all, and he's completely resisting it. And it doesn't show it as a dramatic event, but slowly the movie just shows that he just finds newer and newer things, and life is not as boring as it was, even though it is the same day. And of course, the movie ends with, at one point, the day just changes. So, Padmaja, maybe let me ask you. So we've been, talking about this, and you really like this particular movie and its metaphor.
Yeah.
What about Groundhog Day that appealed to you, Padmaja?
Vinay, I must be honest upfront. I hadn't heard or known about this movie till I read in your book, and then I was very keen to see the movie, and I did, of course, see thanks to you. What I'm fascinated is two things. One, that you should find out such an obscure and offbeat movie, which is so apt a metaphor for what you're talking, the subject that you're talking on. And the movie itself is a very apt metaphor, because I think for almost half an hour in the movie, you find the same scene repeating over and over again. It's one thing to say, that okay, this thing happens and you're repeating that, but it's another to show in a visual medium that, the same thing for half an hour. He gets up, he goes, he meets the same people, the same reaction. That somebody in his somebody who's a little impatient might just give up and say, I'm not going to watch this movie. But once you actually break through that and see the entire movie, it's fascinating, because it talks. What fascinated me was that we actually live our lives with our eyes closed. We go through everything like, like every day is a humdrum routine, and daily life is like, done in default automation mode, you know. And then suddenly, in the movie, what happens is, when Phil realizes, that he's back to the drawing board, back to the same day. At certain point, he just resigns to his fate. And that moment of resignation is actually, that moment of awareness is actually where the transformation takes place, where he breaks free and suddenly starts noticing people whom earlier he was disdainful about, or noticing things which he had never noticed, though they were staring right into his face. Now, this happens to us all the time, whether we go, commute in trains, whether we go for work. We might be using the same escalator, the same lift, but we don't notice the people. We don't notice, small, beautiful things that might be, there on our way to workplace, or whatever. And the movie shows so beautifully that once his, the shift in his perspective happens, his life changes. People become individuals in their own right. He starts noticing things. He suddenly becomes alive to the inevitability of the moment, and therefore to certain numerous possibilities, which I think is a fantastic lesson or outcome of this thing, this repetitive nature of yeah, Vinay.
Let me just add to what Padmaja is saying. And of course, this, as we know, it's not shown dramatically, but let's one particular scene which I just want to highlight is when Phil is in a cafeteria where he has been several times before, but this time something different happens. He listens to the piano which is being played in the background. Now, this has been happening for a long time. Phil never actually listened to this. He never could listen to this music because he was lost in his own thought, or in his own resistance to this whole situation he is in. And this is for the first time it is shown, and I'm calling this a musical moment where suddenly he realizes something which was in the background. And he notices, and the question he then asks is, wow, beautiful music. Why can't I learn piano? Right? When you hear something of this kind, and you see the beauty of this, a question like this arises. Why can't I learn? And then he joins and starts learning piano. And that's just one of the things he learns. Then he sees maybe a car which is somebody stuck with a car. So he says, why can't I learn to repair car? Then he begins to help someone who is old and all that. So you see, once, as Padmaja said, you begin to notice things which are otherwise in the background. You just see objects which are interesting to you, um, and background is just background, right? And suddenly, when you begin to see things more clearly, the background can come alive. And Padmaja, when I read your blogs, as you again picked up this DSLR camera and zoom, looks like it acted somewhat similar kind of musical moment for your journey. Would that be correct to say? Um,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, Vinay, in a way, yes. I've always been a writer and, worked as a journalist. And so when you write, it is a creative process and all that. But there is a lot of information around, magazines and all that, which you can always churn and in your mind, if not anything else. And, write. So writing is a easier process in that sense. When I took to photography, I'm basically, I love writing on nature. So when I took to photography, I realized whether it is experiencing the subject or getting into the field, it has to be first hand. You can't rely on something else or somebody else. Your observation is very much first hand. So it so happened that as a bird photographer, I used to go and shoot birds, and often there were days where you would just not see a single bird, or you couldn't get a decent picture. But for a photographer worth his salt or reputation, so to say, it is important that you get at least one good photograph, a day. You at least make a one decent photograph a day. So I started desperately looking for subjects, And then I found that, okay, there's no bird, but here's a tree, here's some weeds, there's some leaves. Then I started noticing how the sun fell on the leaves and filtered through the trees. And in the process of seeing the weeds which were neglected, I started seeing insects and caterpillars and butterflies and what have you. It was a world that opened up.
So
And
Padma, do you want me to show those
yeah,
pictures?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is one of them.
So this now, they say grass is greener on whichever side or other side, but this is grass, and this is something for the Penicillium rubrum grass. It's like 4 feet or 3 feet tall. Now it goes through varying shades, like I like to say 50 shades of red through the season. So much so that you might just think it's a different species every time you see it. So this is of course a picture of the same grass. And now if you look at every a small kind of just one twig, you see it looks so different. Like this one on top it looks like a strawberry popsicle or something with the dewdrops on it. So it's only when you really start noticing these minute things you realize that it's not just a blur of green or red or colors that you see in nature, but it's like every species stands out with its own characteristic. And here, this if you see 3 feet tall grass, and you see that the insects are literally like what 1 inch or something, or thereabouts, or even smaller, or maybe a little bigger. They camouflage and literally are hidden. You don't even see them unless you actually open your eyes and are alive to the present moment when you suddenly see something fluttering and sitting on a branch right in front of you. And then the whole journey starts to looking out for them, and then you see a complete world out there. Like I like to say, Vinay, Nat Geo is next door. It's not far away or
Yeah,
on television.
that's a good
Yeah,
way to say.
yeah. So
Good. So where to go from here?
yeah, so right. So we coming back to self-image. Okay. Now, Vinay, what really got me, gripped me in this was, the googly that you throw every time, the twist to the tail, is that suddenly you talk of the image, the concept of self-image with respect to time as connected to the fundamental illusion of time, or that it's a time trap. You also call it the Groundhog Day moment, where you say that in the movie, the time loop was a day, but you say that in our lives, we actually live the Groundhog Day moment, where every moment we're in a loop which is a moment long. So, yeah, tell me about this, time trap.
So, Padmaja, I guess one of the things which comes out as we look at nature and in general things around us is that everything is changing all the time. But having said that, for many practical reasons, we see things as objects which are relatively unchanging, right? I mean, the table is also maybe changing at a very slow rate, but for most practical purposes, I see table as relatively stable structure, right? And that serves a useful purpose because we can then um, uh, refer to them and use them as objects which I can count on. And I get used to this object world, um, and I see everywhere it being an object. And then I start seeing people also as objects and even myself as an object. And then, of course, there's a narrative, there's a story which gets told to me. I was born in 1969 and, lived this 51 years. And I have photographs which tells me how I looked at different timescales. Now, all this while, I assume that there must be something about Vinay which must have remained unchanged. Otherwise, what's the point? What's the point of calling some entity Vinay if there is nothing which really remains constant? And this is the assumption all of us carry. But I guess I'm not sure if we ever really probe and explore and see what is it that about Vinay, which is really not changing. Body is changing. Um, Mind also seems to be changing. Maybe I can, we can go, I guess Swati, I don't know whether she is there right now. She asked this question, maybe core beliefs or core values, maybe something you hold on to which says, look, this is my core. This is something core of Vinay, which is what perhaps is not changing. Um, and that exploration is what can get questioned as to, is this not changing because it's frozen in time? So finally we said everything we are storing is a map, and the map has a role which has a purpose so that we can navigate this territory. And there is certain part of the map which is self-image, which is serving a useful purpose. But if I freeze something, then it might not work in certain contexts. And to me, that's the kind of thing where things which are changing, I abstract and say, look, this is not changing. And once you say something which is changing to be not changing, it's like a water fountain. That's one of my examples. Is if I draw water fountain, then I would draw something which would look static. But if you ask me any moment, what is water fountain? It is changing all the time. If I try to hold it, it's still changing. So one question to explore here is my map frozen on something which is actually not frozen, which is changing all the time? And if I freeze, then it would be like a trap, because I'm assuming that certain things are not changing, but they may be practical in certain context, and if the context change, I need to really look. So the question is there anything in that self-image which is absolutely necessary? If self-image is a bunch of absolute necessities, then is there anything there which is really not changeable? And the hypothesis is that nothing in the map is not changeable. And if you freeze, then it becomes kind of a time trap, because you're freezing and you stop seeing the world as it is changing. So I don't know, Padma, is it too abstract? Is it making sense?
Yeah, it is making sense, but it is abstract, Vinay. So,
Yeah.
yes, but I can I just bring you back to Henry Molaison? Would you want to talk about that example that you?
Yeah, sure. We can. I mean, HM or Henry Molaison is one of the most studied subjects in neuroscience, in the history of neuroscience, actually, because one part of his brain was actually almost taken out for the seizures that he used to get, hippocampus, I think it's called, and uh, he lost the ability to form long-term memories of a certain kind, and he wouldn't remember things. And the consequence of that, while he had some limitations in terms of remembering the objects and so on, he couldn't also store the hurt. If he feels uncomfortable, he may be feeling uncomfortable for a little while, but it'll go away. So he also lost the ability to store the hurts, um, and have strong anticipation about what kind of breakfast you want. If you ask him, what do you want to have breakfast? He would say whatever is beneficial, right? So, um, uh, and it tells us, um, or at least gives us some clues about possible experimentation. So this process of forming long-term memories, it seems to be forming this chain of links, which is Vinay. And it's storing some useful things, because where do I live? I need to store that information, my friends' information, maybe their houses and my office, all that. But the same link also seems to store the hurts. If somebody says something to me and if I'm hurt, that also seems to be stored there. and associate it with this entity called Vinay, right? And it comes back again when that person's image comes in front or I get an email from that person. Um, so this is the past which is getting stored, which is whose role is questionable. For an entity itself, which is has only a practical role to play. Similarly, my expectations. So what HM points us is to ask this question: can I experiment with subtracting future and subtracting past? And what would those experiments be? For example, if I'm sending an email, can I subtract expectation? Um, if if I'm being heard, okay, now this is where the attentiveness or alertness has to be really, one has to be alert to watch this as to, am I registering herds at this moment? Is it serving any useful purpose? And what is the purpose of this herd, right? But perhaps it may be a little easier for the future. I mean, one has to just try that. Let's say I'm sending an email for this webinar. Can I subtract my expectation that a number of people will turn up? What if nobody turns up? I mean, can I say, okay, that's no problem, right? So these are the kind of experiments through which we might begin to explore um, what is this future which we are really never experiencing, but in our anticipated memories, and the past which is also memory. So is that, do you think these experiments, Padmaja, are something accessible experiments?
Yeah, very much. So, Vinay, to reiterate what you're saying, you're suggesting that our self-image is an outcome of our conditioning that is solidified over time, right?
Yeah.
And as Eckhart Tolle likes to say, he calls it voices in the head, often we live out of those kind of assumptions. And you also say that the creation of I story is linked to the long-term memory. So, Vinay, I would like to bring Eckhart Tolle here because I think he speaks at length in his book A New Earth. He speaks at length on ego, which is what I think our identity actually is. Where we are. It's more ego. It's more like a package deal. More like an inner baggage, where often possessions, our position, our job, our career, our status, appearance, intelligence, what we have, all these becomes a package and our identity. That is what we start identifying with. And then again, according to Tolle, he says that he contrasts that with something called essence identity. Essence identity, where like you mentioned about the frozen map, he tries to say that there is perhaps something that is fixed, that is permanent within us, which is like a bridge, a being, he calls it sometimes. Sometimes he calls it presence or a consciousness, which acts like a bridge between the form and the formless, or the finite and the infinite. And I think that is the crux of what you were talking about also. Is that right?
Yeah, we could say that. Yeah, I mean, we are saying that all I ever know is a map, um, and the territory is largely unknown. I might know a little bit. Some principles I come to know, but largely unknown, and ultimately unknowable. Okay. Now this realization that all I ever know is a map, which is, it's always something which is abstracted. I'm abstracting out the reality, and representing with some objects and their relationships. So the formless that you mentioned is of course unknowable, and of course my map is helping me, but moment I freeze it to some degree, saying, okay, this is unchangeable, it is likely to lead to conflicts perhaps, and that's where negative emotions come up and hurt comes up. So it's a way to say that, look, there's nothing there in that sense. So this time which is constructed, um, for the purpose of simulations, the brain uses it to just simulate the future, but really it's not there. So one has to just act and not give too much of emphasis to that time, I guess.
Yeah. So in that respect, you also talk of how babies actually, show us that it might be helpful to treat every concept as a hypothesis, and they're
Yeah,
actually discovering the map, going around,
right.
trying to feel the map.
I mean, in some sense, some of these things which are external to us, we could actually, like the baby, which brings the ball and tastes it, or tries to use his hands, and validates his hypothesis about what a ball feels like or a ball tastes like. We can't do that for concepts of nation, concepts of religion, which are very abstract, and things like time and success and failure as well, right? We have formed these abstract concepts which unfortunately we can't test them. But even if that's the limitation, it doesn't mean we don't want to explore and check their validity. They may be serving some useful purpose, but we may be taking them to be too literally to be true, right? So and some context that may be actually a misjudgment, mis right miscalculation, kind of. So yeah, that's the exploration to be tried out. Whether, especially, there's some amount of time which is physical, one could say, right? Practical time. I want to meet Padmaja at some time, but this session has to be started at some time, and that time has some relevance. But when I start to project my image to be, when I will become a famous mindfulness teacher in the future, um, I start attaching a lot of importance to that part of self-image, and start freezing. And the enormous interconnectedness, which is all playing out, and who knows where it might take it to, um, I start underplaying its role, right? I start saying, oh, I know, I'm a person who knows this stuff. I'll take some actions which are important, and that will take me forward in terms of, yeah, people will like whatever, right? So, yeah, sometimes one can just call it overconfidence
Um,
about how much of this map, um, its role in overall um, the unknown and unknowable.
Yeah. So when I one thing here, see, it's one thing to understand or try to read the map to understand the world, okay, the external world. The other thing, what I gather from the movie, The Groundhog Day, and the entire chapter or even the whole book that you're talking about is about trying to become a better person, you know, trying to become a person who is more connected to the world and humanity at large, trying to understand, having more harmony with each other between human relationships. Am I right? I mean, would that be right?
I would say um, that's so trying to become anybody is the process of becoming. And the book at its heart has a hypothesis that process of becoming is the root cause of human suffering. Okay, so any moment one is trying to become somebody. Okay, even if it's like a better person, peaceful person, noble person, mindful person, the same process of becoming is active, trying to project your self-image in the future as somebody who would have become better. So the time is operating, in a sense, to really become better. And I think the book is suggesting to watch out, because that's what is really, and that is solidifying the expectation over a period. So, no, no, when I should become good mindful person, whatever, right? So process of becoming, and it's maybe it has some role in just planning out and stuff, but in general, it gets attached to my self image, and that's what sooner or later turns into conflict.
No, Vinay, what I'm saying is, say, for instance, in Groundhog Day, the fallout of Phil's opening up to the present moment, sees him understand and be more empathetic with the people around him.
Yeah.
Yeah. It makes him realize that there is more to, because he's been disdainful earlier, a little
Yeah.
arrogant. He used to find the people who are perhaps not educated or sophisticated to be somebody who is, not worth his time, not worth his attention. And suddenly something in him clicks where he realizes that every human is worth something, where that, as Eckhart Tolle again would say, the field of awareness between two humans when they come in contact, whether it's an
Yeah.
interaction or whether it's a relationship. Something
Right.
like fallout, it seems like Phil seems to have become a much better person, a more harmonious entity. You know,
So
it's not a question of
okay,
becoming as well as a
one could.
fallout.
So Phil, so I would just look at it from moment to moment. Your responses become more harmonious to your surrounding. Whether that means now, if you interpret that as Phil becoming better person, to me it is well, it is in some practical sense it may be okay. I mean, Phil doesn't exist as an independent entity. That is at the heart of what we are saying in this
Okay,
chapter.
okay.
Phil never existed as an independent entity at all. Okay, Vinay doesn't exist, and moment to moment there are changes, right? But of course, when the seeing happens clearly, the responses of that Phil or Vinay or whatever, Padmaja, they become, I mean, with that awareness of the context, you automatically help. You automatically learn something new because you will notice it. Otherwise, you would not. Yeah, is that okay, Padmaja?
Yeah, perfect.
It's a
Absolutely.
good time to start. Maybe we've to just converse with people around. Yeah, guys. Sorry, we took a little longer. Hopefully, we can go 5 minutes extra this time because I started late. But let's at least chat with some of them. Guys, any observations from your side? Is it hopefully it was not too abstract? Um, but Padmaja brought in some good examples and anchored it. Yeah, thanks. Anybody? Um, Abhijit? Yeah, you're a little, you're not, you're very soft.
There's a chat question. You put in a question chat.
Let me see,
Hello.
Abhijit. Yeah, okay.
Vinay.
Yeah, yeah.
Yogesh here. Yeah.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, just listening your both of discussion. Really, I like it very nice. I want to mention the Einstein quote very nicely in some few words that a human being is a part of whole called by us universe, a part limit in time and space.
Yeah.
I know that you know it, but it explains everything what you already mentioned, and you are experiencing and putting in your book very nicely.
Thank you.
The are you aware of that total sentence?
Uh, I will double check. I mean, thanks for mentioning. Einstein
Okay,
mentioned
okay.
several things about space and time, but
Just a minute. I will go. A human being is a part of whole called by us universe, a part limit in time and space.
yeah, yeah,
He experiences himself, his thoughts and feelings as something separated from the rest,
yeah,
a kind of optical delusion of his consciousness.
sure.
This delusion is a kind of prison for us, restricting us to our personal desires and to affection for a few person nearest us. Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circle of compassion to embrace all living creature and the whole nature in its beauty.
Okay.
Yes,
So
finish.
Yogesh, thanks for mentioning this. So one of the important things that the book tries to bring out
Yeah.
is that there are very similar things, and maybe same things said by Upanishads.
Yeah. Yeah. Everywhere. Everywhere. Yeah.
And that is mostly not serving any useful purpose if one doesn't experiment with it.
Very true.
Okay, so unless one knows how to experiment with something, it
Yeah.
becomes a
Yeah. Yeah.
knowledge which becomes part of map, which gets frozen, and I can iterate, go to a class, and read out.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
question is, how do we experiment? Is the question we are. Okay, any sentence anybody says, how do we experiment? Okay, how do I subtract past? How do I subtract future? So that is the crux of what at least I feel is relevant.
You already mentioned there.
No, I
Just
can mention anything, or Einstein can mention anything.
no,
Anybody can
no.
mention anything. The point is not what I mentioned, Yogesh. I mean,
Uh,
I'm sorry, but I'm just saying experiment yourself. That's
yeah,
important.
very true.
Okay, you want to experiment, please experiment. You don't want to experiment, that's fine too.
Yeah.
But it's not the sentence that is important.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
If you're interested in experiment, please experiment. If
Experiment.
you feel you can by heart and reiterate, that's fine too. Yeah, but what is suggested here is the primary is experimentation,
Experiment. Very, yeah.
individual because until that point the sentence is just a theoretical sentence.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Abhijit, you were trying to say something.
Yeah, and I think you partly answered my question. Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Well, thank you to both you and Padmaja for the nice discussion. Yeah, you kind of partly answered my question. My main question, which also I think we discussed before, is why? Why do the exploration? Why do this observation? What is the motivation coming from? I just want to go back to the example which you used in the book about the Groundhog Day. And it's a really wonderful movie, one of my favorites, and it really reflects our life so much, and that's why it's such a popular movie. And you focused on one part of it, about at the beginning, about how he goes into reputation, but the his journey, although he is going through the same day, his journey through the movie is amazing. It goes, so there is a journey, and there does seem to be some kind of idea of progress for himself, in the sense that first is that he tries everything which gives him pleasure, and then he kind of gets bored, and then he tries everything, starts noticing stuff, and uh, that immediately there is acceptance we see of his situation. And then we see that he actually starts engaging himself in various pursuits, ice sculpting, piano, this, that. And even he goes through that phase too. And so I guess before all this, he starts actually trying to get out of it, right? This thing about when he realizes he does all kinds of things to get out. And then he accepts, and then he goes through this. And towards the end, he actually is trying to find meaning, that there is something beyond this which will just, and the end of the movie, of course it's a movie, it cannot end in a pretty bad note, so that's why. And I hope I'm not giving anything away. At the end of the thing is he finds love, and that kind of snaps him out of it. So although we have been going back and forth about this progress issue thing, I mean, Martin Seligman talks about this pleasure, engagement, and meaning sort of paradigm, which also reflects this purusharthas in Hinduism, about the dharma, artha, kama, moksha purusharthas, the four purusharthas in Hinduism, and and this exploration, uh, which he also does in Groundhog Day, the awareness, the fact that he becomes aware of various things, you can see it's just enriching his life. And as the awareness moves from various things, his life gets more and more enriched, and finally he snaps out. I mean, to kind of give the analogy that there is something beyond this daily monotonous
Yeah.
existence. So that's very nice example. But again, you have focused on different things, which
Yeah.
because the movie also gives a way
Hmm.
to a way out of it. It is not just the notice the daily monotonicity, but actually he kind of also does more.
No,
Uh,
so one, Abhijit, one way you are saying it's I think it's beautifully you pointed out. One way is to say Phil gets meaning in his life, finds meaning in his life. Would you say is that you're trying to bring out? Uh,
he's going after his. I mean, I don't know if that's the
yeah.
point
So
of the movie, but
and that is also ties to your question. What's the point of it all, really, right? Why do this, or
why
what's the
do they
meaning of life for X? What's the meaning of life? And if you look at the essence of um, this chapter actually says that the question is misconstrued. Okay, um, because it assumes that there is an entity to which life has to mean something, which exists in time. Okay, I mean, Vinay's life. What is the meaning of Vinay's life, right? I mean, assumes Vinay as an entity which continues, born on certain day. To me, um, meaning is more fundamental than Vinay. Just like
Yeah, I agree.
ocean is more fundamental than the waves, right?
Yeah.
So if Vinay is like a ripple, then of course the ocean of meaning expresses in certain way through one ripple, and it expresses itself through a different way in different ripple, right? And when um, that awareness, or when the seeing does not happen clearly, it expresses one way, and when seeing happens, it expresses in a different way. That's one way to look at it. Of course, you flip it around and say, no, no. Phil finds meaning in his life over a period, and Padmaja was also trying to say he becomes a better person. I mean,
Well,
perhaps that could be
um,
one way to look at it. But to understand the essence of time here,
mhm.
uh,
One thing I just don't want to take up all the time. Just one thing I want to mention in the movie itself. One of the ways he finds meaning and happiness is actually being unselfish. He realizes by helping other people, and he starts doing this random acts of kindness, kind of, so as to say, and he realizes that is actually giving him a lot of
uh,
purpose,
yeah,
etc.
so that's one way to look at this. What uh, Another way to look at it is to say that once you see things more clearly, helping or these acts of kindness is just a natural response of seeing clearly at that
Yes,
point.
one can. I mean,
Yeah,
again,
which
all
means
for non-causality, but okay.
just it. That's that. But anyway, I mean, I think we can perhaps discuss this. Much
Right? I
more. Yeah, but
mean,
thanks, Abhijit, for bringing
yeah.
this. Okay,
Thank you.
yeah. Anyone else?
Yeah, hi Vinay.
Yeah, Swati.
Yeah, happy Diwali to all.
Happy Diwali. Yeah.
Yeah, so one of the experiments that you have written at the end of the chapter is like, it says like write off a response and don't expect an acknowledgement. So I just tried this experiment. It's Diwali, so the season of gifting. So every year I would pick out gifts and then gift it to somebody, and then would wait for a response saying that such a thoughtful gift, and feel happy about it, or be hurt if somebody does not like it or does not indicate the same. So what I was thinking is, this time I just enjoyed the moment. I thought about the gift, about the person, and I gave the gift. Now my question to you is, I didn't expect a response. Okay, so I feel that part I understood. If I'm not expecting anything, I won't get hurt. But if there is a positive response, if somebody is all very happy and saying, "Oh, such a thoughtful gift, Swati, and I loved it and all," so what should my reaction to that be? Or okay, I'm not hurt. I've given the gift and I'm in the moment. I enjoyed doing it, but I mean, I want your take on on the positive response.
No,
And
no, I would feel happy, Swati.
yeah,
Definitely. I can understand. But by the way, Swati, I must tell you where it helps me sometimes. Okay. So, I mean, this is a case where actually, when some people would typically, mostly they'll respond they like it, or thanks for, giving, and that definitely feels good. But let me give you another example where I raise an invoice for the work I do. Okay, I'm a freelancer, so I have to raise invoices. Like salary doesn't come. Now, sometimes, especially this COVID times, responses were very poor, which means a month goes or 2 months goes, there's no response. Finance department is sitting on the invoice. Now, of course, if I just don't take any action, I'm just not getting paid at all, right? Because maybe the finance department is under pressure to delay everything. So my job is to remind. And I need to, in fact, I'm not good at it, by the way. I mean, I know sometimes I miss that, but it's a job where I need to actually set a reminder for myself saying, okay, maybe if there is no response within certain time, then my job is to send a reminder mail. Now that, of course, the idea is not to send a nasty mail or anything, but just send, guys, this is a reminder that this is invoice, right? So I think that could also be a response where there's an expectation from, this is that, yeah, I mean, nothing will come, but it's my job also to send.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, I think your example was also very good. Thank you. Thanks for being us for so long.
Ravi, Vinay, you are saying that you should be a little detached to the outcome, either positive or negative, right?
I mean, so Padmaja, what I'm saying is being detached can be like a goal, but I think it's more like a side effect, if you ask me. I should begin to see that, okay, I mean, if I give too much importance to these expectations, then they may become rigid. And then it becomes, boss, why is this guy not responding, right? I mean, I become upset about it. So rather than that, there may be all kinds of reasons why somebody may not be responding. Okay, it's my job to send a reminder. Okay, let me send it, right? I mean, that's one way. But I think, to me, if you ask me, if I try to become that, I'm not sure how, it's just the same process of becoming, perhaps. Just to see the nature of time here, and it's meaningless in making the expectations rigid, perhaps. Yeah. Anybody else? All right, then. I think it has been a fantastic journey. Thanks, Padmaja, for being here.
Absolute
And
pleasure.
wonderful, yeah. And for all the collaborators I've had, co-hosts from the first session onwards, yeah. Everybody, thanks a lot. And all these people, Swati, Abhijit, Jonathan, many of them, like Vivek, is he around? They have been there for almost all the sessions. So I really appreciate their help and raising questions, and I think exploring some of these aspects like progress. Abhijit is just not ready to budge on the progress part, and maybe there's something, there's a point that he's trying to say.
Saying he wants to say something.
No, and maybe I can learn something from the point that he's trying to say. Yeah. So, but I think wonderful to have all of you, and hope to continue to interact with you. Yeah. So thanks a lot again, and goodbye. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Vinay. Thanks. It was wonderful.
Thank you.
It was very good. I think the sessions were very good. So
Yeah.
thanks a lot.
Thanks.